Welcome, everybody, to the Thanksgiving stream. Tonight, we're going to take it kind of easy. We're just going to riff back and forth a little bit. We each have a topic that we're going to bring up and talk about. Nothing super prepared. We're just kind of going to have a round table and talk. Kind of like if we were all sitting at the Thanksgiving dinner with family, getting in trouble and making enemies. You know how it's going to be tomorrow, I'm sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, with great Uncle Tim pissing everybody off.
It's going to be just like when we first landed on the Pilgrims.
Yeah. I hope you guys have those flu and smallpox infested blankets.
No, it's just going to be the college students coming back from break.
Yeah.
Thing.
So, are either one of you guys getting together for Thanksgiving with family, or are you keeping it pretty small?
Yeah, we were going to. We were going to go take a trip down to Pennsylvania and spend it with Carolyn's family, but we're just playing it safe because of COVID. So we're gonna do virtual Thanksgiving. We're gonna Zoom everybody, but we're not going anywhere. It's just to kind of gets all red again, and we know a lot of people that we haven't specifically been in contact with, but we know a lot of people that have COVID, and it's not just like this far away thing anymore. It never was, but I mean, we're just being conscious of that. So it is what it is. It's just one more thing, 2020, I guess. But how about you, Nathan and Tim? What do you
I'm
guys
having 30 people over in my shoebox apartment. I'm kidding.
Ned Lamont's going to show up with a gas.
I know, personally for that. He'll show up.
He's going to bring the whole Ghostbusters. Just be like.
I mean, you've been here. You've seen my apartment. The size of it. Those Ghostbusters are getting COVID as well. Everybody's getting COVID, just sort of out of principle. No, we're having a couple people over. It's first, it's such a small apartment. We don't host a lot, but we're going to try this year. It should be fun. Just a couple people, all of them somewhat healthy. So I'm
not judging. You do you, man. We were going to have some family over, but the family is, just my parents and sister and maybe my aunt. That's it. But it ended up that it's all kind of falling apart. The COVID thing's kind of scared everyone off. So it's just going to be the immediate family, me, the wife, and the kids. So, yeah, it's not going to be a normal Thanksgiving.
No, we've decided that we're going to do 2 Thanksgivings next year. So we'll have one in April. There's a vaccine out. We'll have it in April and then the normal Thanksgiving. But if it's not, we'll just go back to back. Like, dude, if we're not vaccinated by the summer, we're just going to have September Thanksgiving and November Thanksgiving 2021.
You're going to have a busy late year next year.
We really are. We're going to double Christmas, double Thanksgiving, double birthdays. We're going to go all out. Double weddings.
Getting married.
Yeah, let's do it.
So kind of on topic, I guess, talking about getting together and getting COVID, my first little meme thing I saw was this one. I actually saw this meme on the Reddit Stuff for Werewolves, but it's from our conservative. The guy's comment.
He's like, it's not real. I have it though.
So if you guys don't know, the Reddit channel Stuff for Werewolves is about people that are saying things that clearly don't understand, that they're like counter speaking their own point or whatever.
Right.
But
so ironically, that subreddit. So that subreddit it's to play on the word self-aware, right? So they always take, and it's mostly conservatives they rag on. They take conservatives who are making a good point, and then they take that point and they're like, wow, look how close to the truth they are. Like they're so stupid they almost said the right thing. And the funny thing is that like we express on this show, we agree on so much. That conservative is actually expressing that point that you think that they're too stupid to get and said it by mistake. It's so not all the time, but
yeah. There's definitely some of them where I'm like, that's no.
Like they meant that.
Yeah, exactly.
They meant the thing that you think that they don't know about.
Yeah, definitely. And Reddit is so heavily liberal biased anyway, like almost
because it's young people.
Yeah, so you get a lot of stuff that's going to lean that way. But I thought this one was funny, just like as I think this came across my screen right after I got done talking with somebody about how conservatives are more likely to get it because they're more likely to forego the precautions. And so I just thought it would be a funny one for y'all.
I appreciated it.
Did you appreciate that Trump Jr. got it, or just the meme altogether?
Oh,
Poor guy.
I don't want.
Did we hear anything about that? I haven't. So I just saw that.
No.
I think I honestly just saw the meme that you put out just now. Like I actually saw that as it came across the front page. But other than that, I haven't heard. I haven't heard if he's in dire straits or if he's asymptomatic. I haven't heard anything about it. I don't even know if it's true, honestly.
I haven't either. It's true. Yeah. No idea. Who next?
All right, let me. I got something. Oh, I wanted to say before I go into my thing. So I actually started advertising a little bit on Facebook, and there was just something absolutely hilarious waiting for me on the Facebook page when I logged in today. Let me read this to you. I'm not going to bring it up because there's almost no way for me to zoom in on this because it's a screenshot. But let me read this to you. And this is about the ad that I tried to run. So Facebook has heavy reviewing processes, and so every ad that you put out is reviewed, especially for political stuff. But here's what it says. This ad isn't running because it uses images that excessively focus on a person's body or any given body part, for example, focusing on abs or belly fat. This can make users feel bad about themselves and goes against our core value of fostering a positive global community. And so our ad for last week did not run.
Did you take that shirtless pic I sent you and use it as the ad?
The ad was a link to our YouTube video.
So it was just our faces or whatever?
Yeah. I was in the picture I had my arms up like this. So that's probably what it was keying off of, but
that algorithm is screwed.
Are you guys turned on by my arms? Is that what's going on?
No, I don't have an arm fetish, man.
So I appealed it, but I just thought that was crazy as hell. I mean, I was just laughing, like
that's dumb.
Like us, like we literally, it's like look at this screen right now. It's 3 white dudes sitting in chairs from above the nipples up. Like, what is the matter with you, Facebook? Even if we were shirtless, this would be PG.
This is actually just porn, just very.
Right. You just can't tell because it's
porn. It's very niche.
Anyways, all right. So I've got a Babylon Bee article right here. I saw this on Reddit first, but it's a Babylon Bee. So for those of you who don't know, it's an Onion-like publication where they publish satire. We must cancel Thanksgiving, says CDC scientist who looks suspiciously like a turkey in a lab coat.
That's clever. That's clever.
Take that, Democrats. Stop ruining my life. Anyways, all right. That's all I got. That's that one. What else? Chris, you have anything?
Yeah, so it's hard to pull up both tweets of this guy at the same time, so I'm just going to explain who he is. So this is Representative Anthony Sabatini. Not to be confused with federal representative, he is state representative of Florida. He has a pretty big following on Twitter, though, which is pretty impressive for a state rep. So I just want to say this is like the ultimate irony here on the right or on the left. We're just like, what is going on? You guys are insane. This is what happens when we read this stuff. So 2 days ago, he tweets abortion is murder in all capitals, and then a few days before he tweets in all capitals, Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent. And it's just like, dude, come on. It's just like he's like abortion is murder, but Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent. And obviously, I get it. I get what the right's going to be like, well, you can't compare apples to oranges. But it's like, no, Kyle Rittenhouse actually murdered people with a gun he bought from a stimulus check that he shouldn't have had, that was unregistered in another state where he should have never been there, killed somebody, that whatever, they was throwing stuff at him. But then, like, I don't know, aborting like a couple of cells is murder. It's just like, I get it. I get what the right is going to say. I know all the devil's advocates. I'm probably never going to convince people. But it's just like, we look at this and it's like, dude, come on. and then Kyle Rittenhouse getting bailed, him coming out to the Washington Post saying, "I don't regret anything I did." It's just like the dude is definitely cashing out right now. But it's just crazy that like Republican officials aren't like refuting this dude. Like he clearly broke the law.
Yeah, he broke the law, but I mean the main thrust of the contention is what the Republicans find defensible. And the main thrust is not that he broke the gun laws. Most people agree with that, and I suppose he should get fined for that, or whatever the appropriate state judgment is. But the main thrust of what conservatives, or the problem with Kyle Rittenhouse of him killing those people, yeah, conservatives agree he killed them in self-defense. Like, it's not a good thing. It's not a great thing. We wish it didn't happen, but he was justified. And so a lot of people exaggerate by saying he did nothing wrong. That's not true. That's not true at all. And even in the situation with, like the whole setup, he wouldn't have had to do that if he wasn't there. I understand that. But all right, we don't need to get back into that. But I mean, and then conservatives are going to say, as you know, conservatives are going to say that cluster of cells is a human being, right? Yeah, especially in the second trimester, the third message. So, I mean, we could go into all that, but I suppose I shouldn't take it too seriously.
No, this is gridlock stuff. It's gridlock, but it's just
yeah. I don't know if there's ever going to be like the abortion argument. That's going to be a demographic shift, no matter what. I mean, you might change a few people here and there, but I don't know that argument ever gets won. There's no new information on abortion, right? There's no new science that's going to come out. Unless maybe they say like, oh, the fetus is conscious like a couple days earlier than we expected. And that's not going to change anybody's mind. So
no, that's just going to take time. That's going to take, core value changes and over time, similar to, I think, it's slavery and other things like that. Like, it's not like there was science that came out to prove or disprove. It just took time for people to, as culture changed slowly, more and more people adopted the anti-slavery movement until it was enough to cancel it. I think one of the good takeaways from that story, though, Chris, is that I'm happy to hear is that there's politicians out there that aren't just going across the ticket on beliefs, that they're willing to say what they believe in, even if it counters their standing, right? Like, I can believe this on one hand and this on the other. I like that.
He's being out there. He's definitely not reserving his thoughts. I guess there's something to say for that.
Well, no, it's not as much that as like he's just not voting ticket, right? Like he's going out and voting for the stuff that how he believes or stands, and not voting necessarily, but you get the point.
Listen, I see no contradiction there. All right, I'll just throw that out there. All right, Tim, what's your next one?
My next one. Let me get rid of the first one. So you can't see the bottom of this, so I'll scroll down in a second, but oh, wait, I actually have to shrink this. Anyway, the bottom of it says, laughing nervously, what the fuck?
Can you read that, Chris?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I was thinking about that. That always bothered me. Is like, why would ambulance rides be so expensive? I thought about it for a long time. I didn't actually do any research on this, which is, not a good look, but I thought about it for a while. I'm thinking ambulance rides. I don't know if you guys know anything about this, so correct me if I'm wrong or if you know something, but they probably, all the ambulances are probably all stocked with like vials and vials and vials of anti-serum, anti-this, pro-this, a whole bunch of, chemical this, that, and the other thing, maybe a couple bags of each type of blood or something like ambulances are probably loaded to the gills with a whole bunch of expensive medicines and whatever it is. And a lot of that probably expires, so even if it doesn't get used, it probably has to get changed out every once in a while. Like, I can kind of see why an ambulance ride would be so expensive, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's that. You're also paying for the medics that are in the ambulance, and
right.
its ability to be ready and waiting for you. You're not, it's not like there's a bunch of them out there, and you're like, hey, that's cool. I'll wait a half hour till it gets here. You get it. Yeah. So there's a lot that you have to pay for there. But yeah, I mean,
I think what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think the only thing I can even begin to justify is let's say you only have like 3 or 4 calls a day, but you have to have the ambulance staff 24 hours in the day with 3 people. You're paying for 3 people's hours for 24 hours straight. You're not obviously not an Uber where you're getting calls every 5 seconds, 5 minutes, but at the same time, maybe they are, right? Like, I'm not a doctor. I would love to go look at the actual like rate of like one ambulance that's on call, how many answers they make, and what is the profit of it. But also, again, I don't think ambulances should be profiting. So I mean, at the end of the day, they're definitely price gouged. There's no way they're not price gouged without a doubt.
I don't think
now
so.
Let's go open up a Bambulance company.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. If they're price gouging, I went in on that. I assume when you get down, my assumption generally is like, again, I didn't research this, so I have no proof. My assumption is always that it's like, again, the world is not as interesting as I think it is. There's probably not price gouging ambulancers. It's probably that money probably goes somewhere. I don't know that ambulance drivers are rich people, particularly speaking. So it
wouldn't be the driver; it's the owner of the company. The owner of the ambulance company.
EMTs make about $15 an hour.
That's it.
Yeah,
15.
Yeah, it's not much.
Oh, shit, that's way lower than I was thinking.
Yeah, and there's really not many benefits. I remember, I think one of the this is the stuff that makes me a social. So I want to be very clear. When I was working with a group home on the weekends. So for the past year, I don't work anymore. But for a year straight, I worked at a girls' group home on the weekends until like 1 a.m. Because supplemental income for me. It was extra experience. Long story short, on that end. One of the other staff members there was a woman in her 40s, and she had we got along pretty well. She didn't work every weekend, but one weekend we really got talking, and she was actually a retired EMT. She put in 30 years of service, so she was actually like late 40s, 50s, and there's zero retirement benefits, like zero, no 401k matching, nothing, and so she retires. He's ready to retire after 30 years of work. And then she's like, oh my God. And now granted, I guess you can rag, you can say, oh, well, they should have been proactive. But think about this. You're in the healthcare field.
That's pretty much the thrust of what I'm going to say. But keep going.
But it's still not fair. It's like, you put in 30 years to a company, to the industry, and
how's that not fair? Look. She is a human being. She's an adult. I presume she was an adult for most of that transaction. She knows that she is eventually going to retire. How is it unfair that up front the company says, this is how we are. You don't have a 401k with us, but you're free to invest your own money and start your own up.
I think there's a perception that, keep in mind too, this is not some EMTs going into the field typically have high school diploma, GED. You just need your EMT academy. You do not have to have be well versed in finances or retirement. That's a lot of foreign stuff to people. It may make sense to the 3 of us, but it's a bit foreign. And I think there is, it's not wrong to say, but people probably assume that there's a pension tied to something or some sort of complexity. Like they don't realize how simple this type of stuff is at times.
Well, I mean, to kind of what you're saying is why the 401k, other reasons too, but why 401k, pension, and other things got attached to companies in the first place, and why there's incentives for people to save, because without those incentives, a large portion of the population do not save, right? Yeah. Unless I say, hey, I'm going to match you, I'm going to give you free money to put your money away for retirement, you don't do it, right? And so that's the benefit of the 401k with a company. But outside of that, let's say they were to match 3%, right? So the when you get down to the bottom line, the only difference there is she made if let's say her buddy was working at another company and everything else was exactly the same except they had a 401k and they matched 3%. Her salary is just 3% less total. Her total compensation is 3% less than the other person. That's it, right? She could have easily taken 3% that she would have put into the 401k to get that 3% match and put it into an IRA or to another avenue to save and retire. So I don't think I'm not like torn about like, oh my God, that company, what a shitty company. I don't think that at all. I do think that there's advantages for companies to have that, and they should give me a call. I can help them get a 401k set up, but just kidding. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's not a real big deal, and people need to get educated. We do not teach financial responsibility.
Oh,
and financial
we don't
education
teach anything about being adult in this country in school.
That shit needs to be. I took an investing class in high school as an elective.
Wow.
But I had a high school that was very
masonry as an elective.
Yeah, I took it as an elective. I thought it was interesting. But my school, one, was, I don't want to say progressive, that's not the right word, but was kind of pushing towards college prep enough to where my senior year we took electives, right? A lot of schools don't even do that. You just have your curriculum. But other than that one course I took, I didn't have any teaching on how to invest or what investing was or how to save or retirement saving or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
No, just real quick, but same here. I think that's one of the flaws of our education systems, that we're not teaching certain life skills. Like these are things that are definitely transcend. I'm sure that as much fun as I had in metalworking in high school,
yeah, masonry.
I'm sure those classes could have been replaced with personal finance, investing, all that.
How to do your taxes, how to change a tire, how to cook a meal, how to plan, how to plan your diet out, how to.
I think all that's important, though. Like even the metalworking and the woodworking. Like how many students took that class and ended up becoming a mechanic, or a machinist, or a construction worker, or something along those lines because of those courses. Like I think it's important for us as we go through our education to be exposed to a lot of different sides of what the world brings and the different talents and workforces. But we shouldn't do that at the expense of life skills, right?
Yeah.
Like
there's room to walk and chew gum there. I don't think there should almost be any academic. I think your senior year should probably be 50% academics and 50% life skill courses, and maybe even the first year of college. Maybe universities should do it. Someone's got to do it.
I think part of the answer is I think school year shouldn't be 180 days. I think school year should be. We should not have summers off. We should not have all these breaks. School should be.
Is that your spicy take for tonight?
You're canceled. You're canceled. Get out of here. You're canceled.
Yeah.
It's not my spicy take, but really think about it for a second. There's two reasons why we have summers off. First and foremost, it's because our education system is based on the 1700s farming calendar, and so that's why we have summers off. The second reason is because people like summers off. That's really it. No actual reason.
There's one really, really good reason in there.
What is it?
That we all want it off. We like it.
Oh, yeah, no. That's a bad reason. We can still give a summer break of like 2 to 3 weeks, but not 2 months, right?
Listen, as the resident conservative, I demand that we keep it the same way it was in the 1700s. Huh?
So,
that's it. I'm putting my foot down.
I have to pull up my next thing now, just because.
Go for it. Yeah.
I have to. So I love how basically every study says that students do better in school with less homework and later start times, and workers do better with more vacation and shorter shifts, but we do the exact opposite because of puritanical feelings.
Wow, that was crazy. That's right in line.
I'd be okay with expanding it, getting rid of summers, if you then maybe shorten the days a little bit or whatever. But I think a huge part of growing up as a kid, and for me, college especially also, was learning about who I was, spending time with friends and developing socially. And I think if we're just stuck behind a desk and we're constantly working and we're not developing those skills, that's going to be a big loss as well. So I think there's definitely a balance you have to take for kids like that. But I think to get more in to what we're doing, I think we need to be less lax about our education system. Put more weight on the kids and on the parents to actually, care and do work at home. I know for me going through school, I had plenty of extra time. I slept through half my classes, and I did just fine because they weren't difficult at all. Our education system is balanced to a low, not the lowest, but a low common denominator, right? It's not balanced to force you to strive. It's balanced to make everyone feel accepted and good. And I think we need to work on that a little bit.
Yeah. Right. Bring back bullying. Right, Chris?
Not that.
Survival of the fittest.
Oh God. Yeah. Well, all all the bullies that I had in high school are now the ones on Facebook that are telling me that like COVID is going to government trackers.
Hey, that's not fair. I
I
never bullied anyone in my life.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm all here for like mass education reform, like massive stuff that will never happen. Like I would love like year-round classes, but like more engaging things that like are not just behind the desk, but are like field in a sense. I would love to see increased teacher pay. I would love to see the dissolvement of unions and tenure. I would love to see the rigor at re-enter classes. I'd love to see let's reduce homework, but maintain testing. What?
Charter schools?
Yeah, basically charter schools, but not culture-wise, because we know that charter schools don't actually function well in rural or suburban areas. But the model, I believe, the pieces of it that we can take that would be beneficial.
Right on. Fair enough. Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone's saying. I love it. Good stuff. All right, here's my next one.
Do it.
All right, so this title favors me heavily, but the meat of the article is something I wanted to talk about. It's sort of a major plot point that happened the last week. So the transition funds have been released to Biden at this point. So things, I know we love being hysterical, and I do, genuinely. I love, getting hot takes and worrying about how Joe's going to run. Yeah, Joe's going to run the country into a socialist, hellhole. But the funds are released. Things are moving along as normal, except for rhetorically, I suppose. This one, I pulled up this one because it's more favorable about the person who's responsible for releasing the funds didn't do so, and it was the right thing to do. And I guess I'll just take this guy's opinion. But this is the Washington Post, so
I trust the Washington Post.
Democracy dies in darkness, guys. So there you are. There's your little bit of news, everybody. The transition will happen. Joe Biden will become president. The lawsuits are still ongoing. I didn't pull up any news stories about it today because it's a muddled mess. If you're out there in the audience and you're curious about what's going on, Fox News airs Giuliani's press conferences. Just go watch them. You'll see what he thinks he's doing. I leave it up to you as to whether he's going to actually accomplish anything, but I guess we'll see.
I'll just share my opinion. It's bad. They literally, what was it? They used population numbers from Minnesota by accident or Michigan, and they're like, look, there's more voters than exist. And it's like, yeah, because you used the wrong end state.
Well, did you notice in the one he was giving that got a lot of press conference coverage because of his makeup issues or whatever?
His hair dye was dripping.
Yeah, in that press conference, he was making an argument that that there was like voter suppression or issues in Pennsylvania, and using the testimony from a witness that had filed an affidavit in Michigan for that in the argument during that press conference. Like, he's just a giant mess. Like, and anyway.
Yeah, I agreed. Again, today. So, for any of you conservatives in the audience and you're super excited about the lawsuit Trump is bringing, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do well to represent you because I'm at the very most, I'm on the fence about these allegations. At the being more honest, I view them as very incredulously. But just today, Giuliani had another conference, and he brought up a witness. He introduced him. He said, this is a statistician. He's working on, the election numbers. And the statistician's job was to talk about how these massive dumps for Biden couldn't be real. However, when the guy introduced himself and said, thank you, Mayor Giuliani, I just wanted to correct something real quick. You referred to me as a statistician. I'm not a statistician. I actually did very well or poorly in math class. But here's the numbers. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, oh my God. It's like you almost can't parody it.
Oh, that's real? I got to find that. I haven't seen that.
It's real. So look it up. The press conference Rudy Giuliani just gave today called up a whole bunch of different witnesses. Trump called in. It was a party. It was great.
Oh, my Lord. Also, something I really bothered me. I'm so glad that this didn't happen. Trump flew out like a bunch of like all the Republicans that were responsible for like certifying the election results of Michigan to the White House, got them like really bougie alcohol, and then thank God,
how did that word come back, bougie?
thank God they didn't not certify it. But I was just like, wow, he's really trying to pay him off, like with like $20,000 alcohol.
Yeah, maybe. Looks bad. Looks bad at the very least. Those are my boys. My boys don't ever do anything wrong.
Chris, you got one?
No, I don't. I actually had that one meme ready to go, but I wasn't sure if we were back to the meme.
I've got lots of stuff. Don't you worry.
All right, let's do one. Do I want to show this other one here? Yeah, let's do one from you, one from me, and then let's move on to our main segments.
Well, I want to do two from me because they go together.
Okay,
it's the same conversation. So,
all right.
We talked about the Electoral College, but one thing that we didn't show at all, and I thought this was kind of interesting to go along with that conversation. The yellow is 50% of the country's GDP. To show you how impactful certain areas can be over others, and why, in my opinion, the Electoral College that tries to even out votes by square footage rather than by population or any other metric isn't really fair. And if interestingly to look at that one and this one, this is population. This is 50% of the population of the country.
Right.
And they actually
the other one might as well be a population map.
They're close. You can see that some areas, like if you look at this little yellow dot there, right, that actually moves. It's not there in this one. It moves over a little bit, I think. Actually, maybe that one doesn't. Anyway, there's a couple that move, but yeah, for the most part, population and GDP are pretty closely matched. But to show you again, I think it's the same thing to show. Whereas, population centers massively concentrated. Like, really, you could fit the entire, like, from square footage wise, if you took all those, you could probably fit everybody into California, easily into Texas.
Right.
All of those counties. So I just thought this was interesting. It's not really a point to be made or anything. I just thought I saw this and it made me think of that, and I thought you guys would appreciate it.
Yeah.
I like the Electoral College. I'll just leave it at that. States' rights, baby.
Oh boy.
All right, I'll throw mine up here. Let's see. Again, I don't really use the body of it, but here's the headline. Trump pardons former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who pleaded guilty to lying to FBI. So for those of you who were curious as to why we were talking about the Russia investigation last week, there wasn't actually a rationale. We just wanted to talk about something, even though it was super old news. But turns out there's fresh news about it. So Michael Flynn, who the only thing they got him for was lying to the FBI, which means there wasn't an underlying crime, Trump pardoned him. And I'm curious, obviously I'm framing that in a conservative way, and I'm aware of that. I'm just curious as to what the two of you think about that.
I actually don't care. I was looking into that a little bit. At first I was like, fucking Trump pardoning all his cronies, but after I started looking into it a little bit, they weren't even charging him, and they were looking at dropping the charges. So he basically just made a political, like, hey, look at me, I did something move. Right. When it really didn't have a lot of effect, I don't think.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, it's a distraction at best. I mean, I don't really mind it. I mean, like, dude, when I really look into it, like, yes, he definitely lied about certain details regarding the meeting with the Russians, but at the end of the day, I mean, he shouldn't have to go to prison for the rest of his life just because he lied to the FBI. I think that's a little bit insane. But I do believe it is a distraction. There's a few other things that are quite concerning going on right now. I think Steve Mnuchin was just put a bunch of hundreds of millions of dollars left over from the CARES Act into the general funds, meaning that Biden needs Senate approval to use it now, even though the Trump administration was able to use executive approval. So that's pretty awful, because the reality is it'll get overturned because it'll probably go into a court situation, because you kind of can't do that. You can't just take money from an act and throw it at a general fund prematurely.
Right.
There's things like that going on right now that are bothering me a bit. There's a few other things that are I gotta they'll come to my mind later, but that was the big one I saw. I was like, oh, this is definitely not a major news story right now, but one that probably should be. But it's one of those stories that are like more getting your hands dirty. You need to understand politics to realize like, oh wow, that's like kind of bad. There's like the deep firing right now of different individuals with Trump's new chief of staff that was literally appointed like weeks ago. There's
dude, I feel like Trump's gonna be that if you have real estate property, you rent to people. He's gonna be like that bad tenant that just fucks your place up before you evict him. He punches holes in the walls and like rips out plumbing and shit.
There's been a lot of articles coming out to that effect. I don't know how much I believe him because of who wrote them, but
I don't know the details of a lot of it. I haven't seen anything to say that he's that yet, but I can imagine that he's going to be that way in some ways. We'll see.
Bedroom.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, if anything else, hopefully he thinks he still has a chance in politics or something, and tries to save some face for 4 years from now or something.
I think he's going to run in 2024. Huh? Anybody else excited about that?
Now I've heard they're going to try and run Jared and Ivanka or some shit in 2024.
Oh, please no. I'm not interested in a dynasty. Just no. On principle, hold me to this, guys. On principle, I'm not voting for Don Jr. or Ivanka. I actually like Ivanka more than Don Jr. Don Jr. just seems slimy.
Chaos, clip that. We might need that in 4 years. Clip it.
Don't clip it. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan.
Clip it twice.
No, we'll probably see. I can't imagine. I can see Trump running for president again, but he wouldn't win the primaries. There's only been one time in history that actually happened, and I don't think Trump is young enough for that to be realistic. There's one other time where president lost, and it was right around the Civil War area where you just have constant turnover of presidents.
Yep.
So,
yep.
We're not going to see that happen.
No, probably not. But please, no political dynasties. I don't want Michelle Obama. I don't want Don Jr. I don't want nobody. I don't want another Kennedy. It's not my favorite
Bushes?
thing. No more
you don't want any more Bushes?
Please, no. Especially not Jeb. Anybody but Jeb.
The turtles in his pocket.
Yeah. Tim, did you have one more, or was those two?
No, we're good. Those are the two.
Okay. All right. So here on the Left, Right, and Center show, we endeavor to break the information silo. So you're going to get to hear some, as I've been saying, some spicy conversations, some hot takes today, as it will. So maybe you won't think these takes are so hot, but let us know what you think about it. But this is our safe space. No. What am I trying to say here? This is our safe space. No. It's not I'm not saying it in a negative way. There we go. I'll just have to say it out. I'm not saying that in a negative way. This is where we can talk about the things that'll really get us riled up. But everybody here knows each other, so we can just go at it, and hopefully we all drink beers together afterwards, and it's okay. Anyways, all right. So
of course we will.
I came up with it's not the hottest take, I suppose, but this is a take that, like, you can't really talk about this in polite society without people really trusting you, right? As in the case of Chris knowing me, knowing how I operate and how I think generally. Like, this conversation is impossible to have without having the benefit of the doubt. What you got going on there?
Got some hotcakes.
It's hot cakes, yes, as opposed to hot takes. Oh no, my cat's messing with my green screen. Right? No, you misheard us, Tim. Okay, all right. So, all right, let me set this up here. The rope to hang myself by. So,
that's racist.
Let's start this out. And I introduced this topic to you guys earlier, so maybe you'll probably avoid this trap, or maybe not. Maybe we'll just have a conversation. What do you think about whitewashing? Remember a couple years back where there was a lot of controversies about movies that were Asian, or I think it was mostly Asian movies, where they would take the main character, they would live action the story, but they would put a white person in. The one that comes to mind is Avatar. I know there was one with Scarlett Johansson.
What about The Wall?
What do you guys think about that?
That was like Matt Damon.
Oh, The Wall, yeah. I think those were whatever. I don't know. I didn't see it, so I can't comment.
So yeah, I guess I can go first on this. I mean, so I can speak the far left position, which is not entirely where I'm at, although I'm pretty close with the far left position, is that, you should have real people that are, when it's coming down to race and ethnicity, we should definitely have those individuals portraying races and ethnicity correctly inside of movies, right? So we should have, obviously at this point, I think we all hopefully can agree if we're meant to be having like I don't know, if you're making a movie about slavery, you're not gonna have a bunch of white people painting their faces to be slaves, right? I agree that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Where it also carries over for me is like, yeah, you know, when this next live action Avatar: The Last Airbender comes out on Netflix, they better have a majority of Asian cast, because the TV show is meant to be taking place with, like, you know, individuals of Asian descent. That is something explicit.
Right, and Inuit and, you know, whatever it is, whatever the Fire Nation is.
Hollywood is very, very, very much, well, the Fire Nation is also Asian. I mean, it's just they're Japanese.
Yeah, you're right.
Water tribe is Inuit. But no, when we have what's it called? And obviously the air tribe is nomadic, earth tribe, all that good stuff. So when we look at actors, are Hollywood is overwhelmed with white actors, but it's not that there aren't not white actors. It's just that only white actors have been historically cast, and so that's been problematic when we look at history. So I think it's really, really important to make sure that we aren't wrongfully casting people. I think the further left will take a few steps further on that. They will say things like, you know, we want to make sure that people that, if we have an LGBTQ actor, that individual is represented by an LGBTQ person, and we have a disabled character, then that person should be, you know, represented by a disabled person. I would go as far to disagree with that sometimes, not all the time. I think there's merit, but also I want to say this too. Having come from the theater world, I do think it's really cool and really important for people to be able to express, like, you know, the different dynamics that go into acting, that go into theater, that go into it's an art, right? So there's definitely cases where, you know, every single time a foster kid's portrayed in a movie, I don't expect that actor or actress to have grown up in child welfare. I do expect that research, right? Yeah. I mean, I would love to see more actors and actresses that grew up in child welfare be famous, because there's very few of them. But with that said, you know, I do expect actors and actresses to research, to make sure they know about it, the life of that. That's the point of an actor. It's almost like you research first, and then you're portraying that. You do the due diligence to be able to say, okay, I as an artist can take this character and represent them in art. And I think that is something really beautiful and powerful. And I don't want to take away from that, but yeah, I mean, long story short, I don't think we should have, you know, white actors portraying Asians or Indians and whatnot. We should actually take the effort that if we're going to have someone that's Native American or First Nations or Indigenous, preferred word, that we have someone from that community portraying those characters. We shouldn't have Tom Cruise, you know, painting his face to be an Indian. That's kind of insane.
Okay, so then real quick before I go to Tim to get his take, are you okay with Robert Downey Jr. painting his face black in Tropic Thunder?
That was meant to be satirical, to make fun of other people who were there. So yeah,
right.
No, I mean,
you're a good person. You're not a crazy person. Okay, Tim. I mean, some of these controversies, especially the whitewashing, sort of predates your, I would say, probably your political awareness. So I don't know. Were you aware of this being a problem? Have you heard about any of these stories?
Yeah, I've heard about it, and my general take is that I don't really care. Like either way, like I don't. Okay, what I don't want is that, you know, there's let's say there's a predominantly, you know, white group that controls all the movies, and they're being racist specifically in saying, hey, we're not going to work with black actors, we're not going to work with you know, what minorities, whatever, right? That's not okay to me. What I do find to be interesting, though, is that that people want to treat this different than other things in the world, which is, you have a right to not go watch the movie. And if you think that it's wrong that somebody is casting a white character into an Asian role and not an Asian person, then don't go watch the movie, right? Like, I think that if the population really gave a crap about it, then that would happen more. So I think, you know, my approach is more from a neutral stance. Like, yeah, I don't want to see any sort of discrimination, but I also don't want to see somebody force anything on what is supposed to be in art form, right? Movies and video and all that's supposed to be an art. It's supposed to be some sort of a representation of whoever those people's are views and everything like that. So I also don't want to see minorities forced into, you know, like I would hate it if it was like, oh, well, that person has to be an Asian. You have to cast an Asian or a black or a white or whatever, right? Because, you know, like with Batman, like let's say for Batman in the comics is white, and if they casted a black Batman, I think that's fine. Like if they wanted to take it a different way and cast a black Batman, that's great. Go ahead and do it. You shouldn't say, well, he's white in the comics, so you have to cast a white character, right? Like, and if people liked it, they'd go watch it. They'd be like, hey, cool, black Batman, awesome. Now you really can't see him, whatever, because his suit's black too, right? But like,
so let me take that then. So I'll take that and pivot. So keep everything that you just said and get ready to use it against me in a couple minutes, because I'm about to contradict even some of the arguments that I was forming in my head when Chris was talking. And it's so funny because I love doing this.
Did you see Chris? I took it too far with my joke and he freaked out. He lost it.
Oh my God.
No, I missed it. Sorry.
I was just being a butt. No,
That was good. That was funny. Well placed.
I'm gonna have to rewatch my own podcast. Our own podcast. Anyways, all right. So let me hang myself here. Stop interrupting me. I'm gonna end my whole career right here. All right. So one of the arguments I was forming in my head when Chris, you were talking about it, I was like, well, I don't care who plays the role as long as they're the best person for the role. That is generally my stance, and that will continue to be my stance despite the arguments that I'm about to make, right? So keep all of that in mind, all the good stuff you guys just said, as I transition into saying that
So you're just playing devil's advocate here?
I'm trying to articulate a feeling that I and many people on the right have. Some of it will be devil's advocate-y, and the degree to which I hold this view will be, it's not like a strongly held view, but this is just something that I wanted to try to articulate and see what you guys think. So I am mildly annoyed at the massive push for diverse casting in Hollywood. And what I mean by that is that there are movies, I don't care if it's appropriate for the movie, right? So if, obviously, cast race appropriate, right? So if it's supposed to be a black guy, make it a black guy. If it's supposed to be a white guy, Asian, whatever it is, cast the appropriate race. Fine, great. I'm okay with that. What I've been seeing recently is that, like, if you take a look at all of the Netflix productions, and one of my favorite genres is fantasy, right? And so I'm looking at all these new productions, and you have this medieval, supposed to be European fantasy world. And now, like you were just talking about whitewashing, or we were talking about whitewashing, it seems like everything now is color washed, and that's not a term. Maybe I'll invent that, whatever. It's like you're just they are injecting just massive amounts of like every minority under the sun into these medieval European, supposed to be like castle type settings, and it's like. And I know I'm going long here, but it's like this mildly bothers me because it's aesthetically jarring, but it also bothers me because I know the people behind it are the super woke people that I detest, right? So it's like I was only mildly annoyed before, and it really wasn't worth talking about. It's like, fine, whatever. It's just kind of weird. But it's like one of those things. It's like it grates because it's like I know it's progressives pushing this, and I really hate their ideology. So it's annoying to me more, and I'm really just trying to enjoy this. So I'll stop there. I have a couple different points that I want to talk about on this, but how does that sound? Am I racist? What's going on?
Well, first, can you give us an example of a TV show that you feel like has?
Yeah, The Witcher. They're coming up with the Wheel of Time series. There's let me just show you actually.
They're fantasy series, so who's this thing? They can't have.
I mean, The Witcher has like dragons and goblins, and I mean to say that universe is predominantly white. I don't know.
Listen, guys, I understand that, but like it is generally understood that those are white people, right? So like. For example, let me show you.
I don't know. I haven't read the books, but do the books specifically state that?
The author is Polish. It is generally understood that he's writing it to be like a medieval Poland scene.
Again, I haven't read the books, and if you have, and you're saying, hey, all these characters are white, and they just made them other things, then I'll take that as a good example of what you're saying. But if it's just, I think because he's a Polish writer that he means everyone is white, I don't know that I agree with that.
This is like it's one of these things. It's like generally understood. so these authors would
I've
specifically
played all the
say-
Witcher games and I watched the series, and I generally don't know that or understand it. So it's maybe generally understood by hardcore fans that have read the books. I don't know.
No. Okay, so look, hold on, Chris. Before you go, I just want to point out this is my weakest argument. This is just like I just want to talk about this. I want you guys to, I want to see what you guys think about that line of reasoning. It's my weakest argument. Honestly, I have better stuff to talk about. This one I'm willing to let go of. Like I really, like I said, I don't actually care that much. It's just like annoying because I know it's being pushed by an ideology that I don't like. But go ahead, Chris.
So like if we were watching Lord of the Rings, if we're casting for Lord of the Rings, and they're like, you know what?
That's not a good example because they were actually.
This will be a good example. You didn't let me finish.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're casting for Lord of the Rings and we're casting hobbits, and we're like, hey, you know what? We're gonna make one of them Andre the Giant. Yeah. Okay, that's retarded. Like, we need to we need to make it make sense for the story. And so I think in that case, to your point, like if it breaks your immersion, if it makes the story just not
okay, we'll get to that. I'm not talking about that yet. I'm not talking about that yet. I'm just talking about the general color washing of stories that we generally know to be it's like medieval European fantasy. Most of these or all of these people are white, generally speaking, in the text. Like it's never explicitly stated, but it's European fantasy. So I see your consternation, Chris. I understand. So let me just I'm going to show you one example. So this is one of my favorite series. It's the Wheel of Time. I pulled up like just Wheel of Time illustrations. So it's going to be very hard for you guys to see, but here's 3 of the characters on the left here. White. Once again, don't really care whether they are. I don't mind if there's black people in my stories. Genuinely, I don't. And we'll get to that later too, because I'll talk about that. But again, white. These are official illustrations that I'm pointing out here. White. Right. So everybody in here is illustrated to be white. They're understood to be white. And this is who they're casting. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people right here are supposed to be from the same isolated medieval village. Does that make any sense?
It's fine. Some of them go to tanning beds. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think like I don't see the problem with it. I mean to me,
look, there's no moral problem with. Okay, all right. So, go ahead, Chris, and then I'll make my next point.
Sure. Here's what I'll say. I just needed that one moment of just to grab my thoughts together.
Yep.
So if this next Black Panther movie comes out, and there's like a whole squad of like Japanese people living in Wakanda, that wouldn't work, right? It depends on Wakanda. So right. I get it, right? That's like where we had like a bunch of like, lumberjack rednecks from North Carolina, like residing in Wakanda.
Unless there's an interesting backstory, that's not going to work, right?
Right. So, and I'll say this too. There has been moments that, I'll watch a TV show where it's actually, I think it became and I am a social justice warrior. I want to be very clear on that. Although like I walk the walk, so I'm not like, a keyboard warrior. I'm actually doing things. And I think that's like something I get frustrated with on the left is like, all right, you guys can post things on Facebook as much as you want, but you're not donating. I'm going to get a side tangent right now. People aren't donating. People aren't volunteering. People aren't, actually contributing to the causes and not getting on their Democrat or Republican town committees. They're just like chilling on Facebook and I got 300 likes. And it's like, no, that doesn't work, right? I have no respect for that. So if you are that social justice warrior, go volunteer somewhere. But anyways, I'll say this. When I'm watching...
Don't do it. Watch Jordan Peterson videos. Just stay home.
Go infiltrate the system. Turn the system on the outside in. Anyways, when we're looking at... there's certain shows. Like I remember watching like Arrow. And Arrow, like late seasons of Arrow and Flash... got so over emphatically social justice. I was like, all right, I'm definitely not watching a superhero show anymore. I'm definitely watching like a soap opera on social justice. And I'm not against watching
CW though.
I want to say I'm not against watching something like that. Like it's not like that's out of my peripheral, but it's like not what I was expecting to watch. And I think it took away from the art a little bit. And so I believe when it takes away from the art, if we're trying to really force themes, I think there's better ways to do it. Wonder Woman did a great job of balancing, social justice and the art. I would say the Avengers have done a really great job of that, especially in Endgame. Each one has had a really great Spider-Man, Far From Home. When you have the Daily Bugle coming up, like totally shitting on Alex Jones with like, this is the greatest hero ever, and they're looking at Mysterio. It's like, okay, I love social commentary. I think social commentary can't take away from the art, and so that to me doesn't have anything to do with race or ethnicity. I hope that we have diverse castings across shows, as long as it makes sense.
Then let me make so you're segueing into my next point. So let me make that point, and we might find some agreement there.
So before you switch, like, what do you think about Jimmy Olsen being black in Supergirl?
Is that right, Supergirl.
So the series, Supergirl series, Jimmy Olsen, the photographer, which is from obviously the Superman comic books, he's cast as a black man in Supergirl.
I'm all for it.
I have very little, almost zero problem with that. Again, the only problem with that is that, like, I don't have a problem at all with his casting. The only thing that might annoy me, had I noticed that, like if I was familiar with that, I just would have thought of the social justice warrior behind the recruiting counter, and it would have annoyed me. That's it. Like, that is all that would have annoyed me. Like, I do not care that he's a black man. Anyways, so like Chris, you were saying, so you can't take away from the art. That is actually my next point. So the point that I've made so far is probably the weakest point. I was just trying to articulate that conservatives, we feel Hollywood, we know Hollywood is just chock full of like bleeding liberals, and we just see it in all of the new productions where it's just like they're just cramming as many black and brown people onto the screen as possible, even where it doesn't make sense.
They've never been hired before.
But I'm not. Again, I'm always, if it's the person that fits the job, they should be hired. It doesn't matter what race they are. If they're the best person for the role, hire them. Do not. I'm not for racial quotas, so that 100%.
Question for you, and I know you're not that religious, but how do you feel about Jesus constantly being portrayed? You're
Me?
not religious, yeah. As far as I remember.
No, I'm not.
How do you feel about Jesus being portrayed as a white man in a lot of Christian mythos, whereas he's obviously Middle Eastern?
I don't have a feeling about it. I just, like, whenever I think, since I'm not involved with the religion, I have no emotional attachment to that. But like, so there's a couple of things. So
it's kind of on par with this discussion, though.
Right. It is. But that one's just an interesting conversation to me, because every culture who has a Christian element, they all portray Jesus in their race. So there's an Asian Jesus, there's an Indian Jesus, there's a white Jesus, whatever it is. So every race does it.
Shapeshifter. I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, no, I know. Like, again, no emotional attachment because I'm not Christian, but everybody likes to see a God in their image, obviously.
Yeah.
It's obviously incorrect to say that he was anything other than, a sort of a brown guy from, Judea. So I think.
Yeah, Jesus is definitely a shapeshifter, Tim. You got it down.
Yeah. Well, he flies too. He does a whole bunch of weird things. He's magic.
I'll never forget. On this note, there's this one like Christian film that like portrays Jesus made in like Britain, and it's just like Jesus, blue eyes, brown, blonde,
yeah,
descending from the heaven. And I'm just like, all right, this is wrong. This is all wrong. No, but on that point, I think it's like a really good comment. It's we definitely whitewashed Jesus big time. Like he's.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I want to do a quick story. I'll never forget. I was a senior in high school, and there was this dude who was like definitely, without a doubt. I remember I came across his Facebook recently as like Trump everything now. Like Trump, I'm sure he has like Trump tattooed on his butt. Like I remember telling him,
get mine lasered off.
What was that? Oh yeah, no, he's gonna get a second one now. He'll be things. But no, I remember telling him like Jesus wasn't white. It was like dumb high school conversation.
Yeah.
And like he started getting really angry. I'm like, no, like he really was white. Like I mean, you look in the Bible, it actually says in the Bible, he has like feet of brass. Like last time I looked, brass isn't white. And he heated, like his face turned red. He started yelling. He's like, Jesus was white. And it's oh my god, dude. Like, sorry for rocking the world.
Yeah, spoiler alert, everybody. Jesus was a Jew. It's very It did. It took me a long time to know that. I mean, honestly, like I just hadn't thought about it. It's not. I was not like that guy because I was religious in high school. When I found out, it was kind of like, oh, never thought about that. You're right. Weird. You know, like I've just always seen white paintings of him. But hey, I guess you're right.
Yeah, because Christianity got spread mostly from Europe. They, went into Europe and then spread
the Roman
heavily
Empire.
from there. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but okay. All right. So, all right. Let me get back onto this because I want to let you guys get to your spicy content too, so we can all walk out of this knowing we'll get fired tomorrow. So this point that you'll probably agree with, so that you like this is also kind of proof that or an indication that I'm not the bigot that a lot of people might think I am, with even bringing this conversation up. Here's a point. Why don't we just do race correctly? Right, so let's get past the, okay, fine, it's a medieval fantasy, just about everybody should be white except for some of the cultures that are specifically described as it. Let's put that aside. Fine, let's put diversity onto the map, right? A lot of these maps are large enough where you can put diversity. They're not even doing that right? So the point that I brought up, so again, this picture right here, this is the cast. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are from the same village that has been isolated for thousands of years. And you have, it looks like a mixed race guy, probably black and white. Indian, not sure what she is, probably just black. And then it looks like an Iranian or something like that, like a Middle Eastern guy. Why, like, there's like 10 nations on this map. I'm sorry,
I
it's
thought
small.
they were all Hispanic.
No, they're not. I know. I'm sorry. It's real small. So I had to describe it for you. But
I kept saying that, and I was like, so they picked the whole Hispanic group instead of a whole white group. So what?
Sorry, I could have done better. But like,
except that guy, he's obviously Asian. The one guy,
right? That guy, yeah. So here's my point. There's a whole bunch, like there's a whole map in this particular story. Like, and I'm just going off this one to make a point. There's a huge map in there. Everybody's like, generally, it's like European culture, so you can make all of those people white. Then there's a Far Eastern country. Oh, you could, like, there's people for that. You can make them Middle Eastern so that we can visually understand.
Where's the damn redhead? We are not being represented.
There is actually, so this guy right here is actually supposed to have red hair, and he probably will in the books. The guy in the far left. Let me just finish this point up. There's like a culture from across the ocean. You could have made those Asian people. My point is that, like, I don't care about the diversity. Just do it right. Like, they just crammed because these are the main characters, right? So they had to do it like diverse. They had to pay the stars, and they had to make sure that it was like one from every race. That's a social justice warrior way of doing it. You're taking away from the immersion. You're not doing it right. And there's a good way to do it. Like, there's going to be main characters that come from these other places, and you could have just, like,
I mean, I'm looking at their names, and I'm not seeing, like, it's...
One's named Joshua. He's probably Russian. Looks like Russian. Yeah, Marcus Rutherford. Yeah, they don't look... I mean, they don't look very, I suppose, ethnically, traditionally ethnic names. But yeah, I'm telling you, she looks Indian. She looks black, Middle Eastern. Again, I don't care if there's diversity in the show. Just do it right. Game of Thrones did it right. And I just want to bring that up, and then I'll let you guys talk about it. So Game of Thrones did it right? They had a whole bunch of different nations. It looked normal. There wasn't, like, you weren't getting, like, sucked out of it every couple minutes because there was, like, it's just like a random black guy in this white kingdom. They had the guys from the south looked vaguely Middle Eastern. The guys from the north looked vaguely white. Like, whatever. Like, there's a good way to do it, and you still have representation. So that's my gripe. I don't know. What do you guys think?
My stance is still about the same. Like, if you don't like it, don't go watch it. If it's going to break your immersion, don't watch it. I think that it's great that people are changing things up. I mean, if you look at to go back to my Jimmy Olsen example, Superman was written back in the 50s, 60s. I don't know when it started, but when that comic started. But
wasn't it a World War II thing? Like, he punched Hitler, or was that Captain America?
That was Captain America, but when it was written was still during a more racial time in this country, when there was still a lot more of that divide, and so reimagining some of these stories that were written back then, they're still good stories. They still have some good tropes to them, things, but reimagining them a little bit, I think, is okay. But I think for the person who is the purist, who says, "Hey, no, this is the story, and this person, was whatever he was or whatever she was in the story, and they're 5 foot tall. You can't cast somebody that's more than 5 foot tall. Like, that's ridiculous. Whatever. Like, however far you want to take it, that's up to you. Don't watch it, but let people do what they want to do."
Well, I think too, part of it though is that to come back a little bit. I totally agree. Right?
Is it me or
like the true comic book nerds? Know
Hold on,
that
say that again.
There were many.
You broke up there.
Did you lose? Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
I noticed. I saw it.
That is the scene that he stopped on there.
I know. Look at you making them kissing lips.
I'm just going to try and do it.
Right. Maybe this will work.
It flashed you right before it did it. You could probably pop it back up.
My Wi-Fi is a little funny, but no, the true comic book purists would have realized that, there was many Captain America, there were many Spider-Man, there were many Superman gets murdered by Doomsday, and then you have other Superman take over his mantle that were American and whatnot. Like true comic book purists know the stories that realize no, there's actually much diversity, and so it's just kind of crazy.
Right. So let me just make my point that remember when we were talking early on, so we'll try to loop it back, and then you guys can hold some of that against me and I can hold some of that against you. So, I mean, you had a justifiable, let's say, annoyance, right? This is not like a moral issue. You had a it actually seems like a moral issue to the left as far as casting diversity, but you have an issue with whitewashing, right? And I think justifiably so in an artistic sense. It's just this character is Asian, why are you changing it? Right? And you got justifiably annoyed when directors were changing that. And so, do you not, and I understand that you have a sort of a quota mindset or a reparations mindset or a trying to get an equal outcome. I understand that's your philosophy, but do you not see the contradiction between saying don't whitewash and don't color wash?
No, I totally do. Yeah. What you gave as an example with it and that show you have coming out, totally it makes sense to me, right? Peaky Blinders. Peaky Blinders wouldn't make sense. It takes place in northern, southern Ireland.
Right. Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense if you casted Tom Shelby as an Indian, right? Or as someone from South America. It just wouldn't have made sense, right? You can't. It just doesn't function on those levels. And I would say it doesn't function on the inverse either, right? It's let's get races correct. I think the true root here, I think we're almost at the wrong question. We're asking, how do we correctly portray certain races, certain ethnicities? And that is, I think we're all in the agreement that's let's do it right. Or at least, Game of Thrones is kind of the gold standard. Let's do that. Why don't we just, I think one of the biggest issues, and we're finally breaking this barrier, is we just haven't had cultural representation truly portrayed in movies until the past 10, 15, 20 years. 10 years, really. I mean, now that we're seeing things like Black Panther coming out, now that we're seeing things like, Crazy Rich Asians, movies like that are truly portraying diverse cultures and are allowing, all Asian casts or all African American casts.
I like how you use Crazy Rich.
I love it. I have no problem with those. As a matter of fact, I like them, right? And I don't care that there's all black superheroes. By the way, a lot of people said Black Panther was the first. Have you guys seen Blade? A lot of people haven't, especially my age. But Blade was awesome. That was probably the first black superhero. But I don't have a problem with all of that. I don't know, and it's why are we even talking about this? But this is I always tumble things like this over in my mind. Why does that annoy me? How can I articulate this? So I mean, you guys heard my arguments. People who don't like me are going to say I'm a racist anyway. So I guess I'm not winning any favors. But there it is. So that's my flaming hot take for tonight. I'll let you guys move on. Who wants to go next?
I can go. Mine is.
I can.
You can go, Chris. You go. I'll go last.
Well, rock, paper, scissors for it.
Nah, I already decided. You're going.
I was excited to see how glitch rock, paper, scissors was going to go. Whose lag gives them a true advantage?
I'll go. We'll rock, paper, scissors. 1, 2, 3. Oh, over here.
Took me
All right.
on.
So anyway, I'll go. So I wanted to kind of hit on trickle down economics a little bit. So we've talked about this in he sits back, he's like, fuck. Oh god.
Oh no.
That timing was perfect.
Please go look at the messages I just sent you. Our cat is being hilarious.
Oh yeah. So we've hit on this a little bit here and there. Mostly me and Nathan kind of getting into it and passing, and never really talked about it. So I thought I'd bring up some data and just some information on why I really think it doesn't work. I thought we could get into a little bit of topic and talk on that. So I'll start with this one. And sorry that the graphs they're not super clear. I couldn't find a good picture of what I wanted to show. Most of them were smaller images. But anyway, so this first one, this particular one shows in purple, it shows the top tax rate. So, back in down here, you can't really read it, but this is 1950s, and this goes all the way through the 2000s. So it's a pretty broad, long time there. The purple line is the top tax rate. So your income tax rate. I think this particular graph is actually corporate tax rate. It's not individual, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then the blue up and down here is real GDP growth. And so one of the arguments that people make for trickle-down economics is that if you lower the tax rate, either on individuals or corporations, or both, that more money is available into the economy, and we should see a larger GDP growth because of that. And this graph is actually showing that there is no correlation there. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, you can do a correlation curve to this data. And the correlation curve actually, it's like 0.03. And for those that aren't statisticians, like Rudy Giuliani's witnesses.
Yeah, apparently. Sorry, guys. My Republican fan base is fleeing.
So the way correlation curves work is it looks at the data, and basically if something is 100% correlated, if you have a move in one set of data and the other one correlates with it 100%, you get a correlation of either -1 or 1. 1 being they match. So if one raises, the other one raises. -1 being they're the opposite of each other. If one raises, the other one decreases by the same amount.
Yep.
The correlation curve for this is 0.03, meaning it's nearly zero. There's nearly zero correlation between real GDP growth and tax rate.
Top tax rate. But if you were to look at the data, it actually shows it's null. It means nothing. But if you wanted to, it actually would show that by increasing the tax rate, you would increase GDP by 0.03, right? Like correlation rate. So it shows that they're maybe slightly a little there, but right. So question.
It's enough to say that it's negligible.
So you know more about this stuff than me, and obviously I didn't come prepared for
this is just for talking, right? This is
Yep. So do you have a graph that has the effective tax rate as opposed to the top tax rate? Right, because companies weren't all taxed at 90%, right?
No, but tax rate they vary, right? And to your point, yeah, there are other graphs. I'll see if I have another one on here that does effective, and I have several that talk about this. So I think this is no, that's not the right one. Oh, I closed it.
Oh no.
This one. So here's another one that has effective rate on capital income and statutory rate. But this is
Can you zoom in on that at all?
I can do. Man, which one did I close? Son of a monkey.
The most important one, probably. Thank you. That's better.
And so, but as you can kind of see from the graph, but I can tell you from what I was just looking at, there is very little to no correlation. Like the data shows, there's no correlation between tax rates and GDP growth. So that trickle down economics, at least to the point of triggering GDP growth doesn't work. And not to get too much on just that, because I have a couple other ones that I wanted to show.
Can I make a point about this?
Well, let me talk about a couple more, and then we can...
Go ahead. Yeah. Yep.
So this one is a similar graph, but it also talks about income growth rate. So, okay, great. GDP doesn't grow, but you know what? People make more money. That's the important thing. That's the one that matters. Is that people get they actually make more money. Their income rate grows. And this is actually showing the opposite again. Similar to the other one, the correlation coefficient for this is nearly 0. It's 0.06. Right, so it's showing that there's no evidence that there's any correlation between tax rate, top tax rate, any tax rate and income. It's not to say that if you lower the taxes, that it's going to make a difference either, or raise them. It's just saying there's no correlation. They don't affect each other, right? Tax rate and income are separate things. They don't really relate. Hourly wage growth, similar to income. In a way, but a little bit different. If you compare the curves, you can see that they don't really match. So they're not.
So
they're
let me
independent.
just ask you. I mean, you know more about economics than I do. Why do these graphs have top tax rate? Because and as I again, this is as I understand it, my layman's understanding of tax rates. The top tax rate is not a very good metric at all because companies aren't or never were taxed at that tax rate. So they were mostly taxed at around something like 35, not 90.
Part of there's a couple caveats there. One is I didn't have a lot of time this week to do deep dives and get all the graphs that I wanted in the way I wanted, right? So like I said, these aren't very clear because I wasn't able to get to the right research papers that I wanted to get to. So the particular ones that I pulled were looking at top tax rate. But why I still think that's relevant is generally you don't have someone come out and say, hey, we're just chopping off the top. Everybody else still pays the same, right? Generally, all the taxes shift downwards to some extent. So I still think top tax rate shows you an effective tax rate in a way. Not necessarily exactly, but I still think that they're relevant. So I think it's still worth the talk, and it still shows the point. But I do give you some credence in saying that, talking about corporate tax rates versus personal income tax rates and talking about effective and average and how things change do play a factor. But almost every study I've seen that I've ever looked at historically show that there's really no correlation on these. So this is just the particular one that I pulled. In this particular case, hourly wage growth rate, which is one of the big ones, right? The trickle-down economics thing, one of the biggest things is, hey, if you cut corporate tax rates, which is what this is showing, the corporations pay their people more money. So their wage should go up. And interestingly, the correlation coefficient for this one is 0.34, meaning that it's not quite 0, so it's not as far removed as the other one. So there's some correlation here, but it's actually a positive thing in that if you raise their taxes, you increase the wages. And I actually don't think that there is a correlation, and that's what the papers that I've read say. It's just that wage growth was higher. Yeah, it's more of a coincidence thing than anything else. But there's a little bit of that correlation. And then the last one that I wanted to show here is unemployment. So they say, well, unemployment changes, if you have lower tax rates, and the same thing applies. There's no correlation between the top tax rate, or probably the tax rate, which I don't have the data, and unemployment rate. There's no correlation. It doesn't show that one affects the other. And that's the biggest thing to take from these is it's not that, by lowering taxes you make it better. It's that taxes don't affect it. It's not a thing that drives these metrics. And so I guess I'll leave it at that for a second, and we can get your impressions and thoughts, and then I have a couple other ones maybe to counter with that.
What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I'm pretty much in full agreement. I think trickle-down economics is a sham. I think it's definitely just like a way for the rich to stay rich and continue to build up wealth. I think I'm sure, there is obviously a correlation, I would say. I mean, when we look at it like really, really high tax rates, like sure, when we nuke somebody at 70% or above, like of course it's going to affect growth. But
on that graph, I know it was hard to read. On that graph on the left, and I just closed them all so I can't pull them back up, damn it.
That's what I was going to ask you too.
But the one on the left was 90%. So back in the 50s, the corporate tax rate the top rate was 90%.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
the effective tax rate wasn't like that's not incredibly honest. That's what I'm going to talk about when I get to mine. But effectively, and this is just off my memory, and I could be wrong. And this came from conservatives, so take this with a grain of salt. I think effectively the tax rate was around 35. It wasn't 90. Like with all the loopholes and tax breaks and all that kind of stuff.
At the end of the day, it's just like, for all the talk that conservatives have on like America first, and I'm all here for this. This is our country. We should protect our country. We should like make a great country. To be able to do that, the reality is we need robust, reformed social programs. We should be the best in the world. We should have the best healthcare in the world. We should have the best roads in the world. We should have the best military in the world. To do those things, it requires money. And one of the ways that we receive money is by taxing the wealthy. And by creating jobs, which then in turn produce income tax, which also comes from the wealthy. But at the end of the day, it's like, Jeff Bezos should not be taxed. Capital gains, these types of earnings from stock breaks and from stock expenditures instead of income expenditures, these things should be taxed at a heavier rate. I'm all here for taxing the hell out of the wealthy. That's like something I'm pretty much all here for.
So on a sidebar, just because you mentioned it, do you think that income gains from investments should be taxed less than, equal to, or higher than normal wage earnings, so earned income?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, so I can't like throw out specific numbers because I don't want to be.
That's what your gut feeling. No, just like do you think that if I took $100,000 and I put it into the stock market and it made $100,000 for me this year, that I should pay? That should count towards my normal earnings, and I should pay my normal income tax on $100,000, or do you think that should be taxed differently than if I would have gone out to a job and made $100,000? Yeah,
I think it should be taxed higher than it currently is, but not to the extent that it's at the. Sorry, I'm hiccuping. It should not be taxed at the highest rate possible because I do think there's something to be said about investments, especially when it comes to retirements. Maybe we can have different tax breaks. I think that's where the tax code needs to be a bit more complex, is when it comes to investments, but it definitely shouldn't be like, this 15% type situation.
Gotcha.
I don't know much about that. I don't know what it's taxed at right now, but I'm generally for lower taxes. And I think people investing in companies should be incentivized. So the less taxing, the better.
Yeah. It's taxed at two different rates. It's taxed if you make under a certain amount of money, you pay capital gain. Well, first off, you have short-term and long-term capital gains. Short-term is taxed at your income rate. So just as if you went out and worked a job, long-term is taxed at its own rate. And then long-term capital gains tax has ranges, and it ranges from zero. It basically, if you're a broke ass and you don't have a job, you have no income, you don't pay any capital gains tax, all the way up to 20%. So if you're a wealthier person, and it's not even that wealthy, right? It's not that hard to get to the 20% range. Then you pay 20% on your capital gains. But income tax rate is much higher than 20% for the highest tier. So there's a disparity there.
Okay, so I want to make a couple points. So number one, we have one of the most progressive, from what I've heard, we have one of the most progressive tax policies in the world. Even among the countries that we generally consider socialist, we have a very progressive tax rate where the rich people are paying about 40% of our entire tax base, and it's already more than the people who have those social programs you're talking about. So that's number one, and please fact check me on that. Like seriously, come back at me with some stats. I'm down for it. But
totally believe it. But also keep in mind that we have a massively expensive military, and that's where a lot of those funds go to.
Agreed. Yep. So that was one point. Another point. Again, I'm going to reiterate. I don't. So this is not a point for or against, but the graphs that Tim showed, again, it was top tax rate. And from what I understand, top tax rate is not necessarily something good to go off. You want to know what the companies were effectively taxed at. So for example, back in the 50s, Tim showed us a graph that had the top tax rate being 90%. There was no companies getting taxed at 90%. They all, there was loopholes. There was, whatever there was. Nobody was getting taxed at 90%. From what I understand, from what I remember hearing, it was 35, 40% at most, which is still ridiculous. Say what?
If they were a sucker.
Yeah, exactly. They're stupid.
Again, I doubt that. I agree with you. I doubt that most companies are paying those rates, and I think if you had tax rates that high that companies are actually paying, and a lot of times they probably would leave and go somewhere else, especially in today's economy. And back in the 50s, it was not a global economy. Right. It wasn't like you just went to China instead, or you went to somewhere else. So things are different now, and I understand that. And tax rates should, adjust and apply to the situation that we have. And
right, and I want to piggyback.
My point is more though that, and so let me show this graph just real quick, because this kind of goes on to your argument a little bit.
Yep.
So this is the average federal tax revenue. So this combines corporate and personal income tax as a percent of GDP. So it's not about effective tax rates. It's not about if it's corporate or individual. It's about the total amount percentage-wise of GDP that the federal government is taking from the populace as far as taxes, right? And you can see that ranges from 2.5% to 17.5% over 140 years, 150 years, and the average GDP growth per capita is almost identical.
Right. So, and that actually rolls into my last point, which is ignoring external factors. So just for example, with the graphs that you showed, in the 1950s, the American economy had this wonderful advantage of being the only economy that hadn't been bombed in the Western world. Right. So I think that if those 35%, 40% effective tax rates were lowered down to 20%, we would be infinitely richer today than we are now. Right. So my argument is actually that it's not that, because we're looking back at it, like, look how rich we are now. Obviously those 90% top tax rates didn't hurt us, when in reality, it's possible that if those were lower, we actually would have been far wealthier now than we are. But to continue on the theme of external factors, right? So a whole bunch of things are changing, right? And you have to take all of those things into account. And this is where it becomes incredibly complicated. And it's not just statistics, or it is statistics, but you need far more than just, tax rate versus, wages. And it gets very, very, very complicated. But it's like the 50s, the United States was an industrial powerhouse because Europe was bombed out. Then we moved into a global market that depressed the market in some places, that did other things here. There's massive effects for this. Whole industries went under, whole industries rose. Technology is now helping us be more efficient than ever. Like, there's just like a billion things that you can look at, right? And so even the last graph that you showed there, we're saying the government is taking 2% of the GDP back in the 1800s, then it was 10%, then it was 15 or 17%, whatever the numbers were. That doesn't mean that if those numbers weren't lower, that maybe that last tick in the GDP would have been way up if we weren't taxing at 17%. So it's
I agree with you. The federal government could be saying, hey, we only want to maintain about a 2% GDP per year growth, so we're going to tax accordingly, right? That could be what they're doing secretly behind the table, right? I mean, we can always find reasons to why something's happening, but I think that if you really want to be honest with yourself and take a look at the data, you'll find that overall tax rate doesn't affect all of these economic factors that people are talking about. And I think the big reason why, my gut feeling on this, is because taxes aren't just removing money from the economy. It's not like the government just takes the money and sticks it in their sock drawer, right? They take the money and they buy airplanes, they buy boats, they pay for roads, they pay for other services, they put it back into the economy, they do other things with it. Now, not always efficiently, right? They might buy golden toilet seats, but somebody sold them a golden toilet seat, right? Like, those things are coming from the private sector. So the tax money goes into the public sector, and then it gets diversified and spent back into the private sector somehow or some way. And it might not be in exactly the same way that it would have happened had the money not been taxed in the first place, but it also could have been that the guy who it got taxed from would have just stuck it in his sock drawer, right? And that's the thing that trickle-down economics makes the assumption on, in my opinion, is that when a person gets so rich, they're like, hey, I'm so rich, let me give more back to other people. And that isn't what happens. Those people that have the drive and the strive to become that wealthy and work that hard, they don't look at it like, now I just want to give it all back. Now, they give some back. I mean, you're going to look at Bill Gates as a great example. He gives a ton of money to charity. But, that's overall... Money,
that's not
and I'm not saying that we have to take all their money. Like, you should be rewarded for working hard. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have progressive tax rates, or that we shouldn't have some social systems in place that help to take that money and redistribute it so that, and it actually helps the wealthy, because as GDP, if you can have a higher GDP growth, that wealthy person that owns a business, their business is going to grow faster, and in the long term, they're going to be wealthier. And that's actually what, and I don't have the data pulled up for this discussion. I didn't think I'd have time because we're kind of, doing so many different segments, but that's what the data shows, is that when you do it that way and you put the money back in manually, you don't say, hey, I hope that this guy's going to be charitable enough to just give it away, but you manually take it back and you put it into the system through building up, road systems, other things through the government, or social systems. Like this is when I got really interested in this stuff, was looking at Andrew Yang's discussions on mind blanked. Well, when he was going to give everybody a monthly stipend, basically.
Universal UBI.
Universal basic income. Thank you. That's when I really got interested in looking into this. That actually is a great way of taking the money, putting it back into the system, and getting it spent. If me or you get an extra $1,000 a month, we're going to spend it. If Jeff Bezos gets an extra $1,000 a month, it's not going to make a difference, right?
Yeah,
so, and by spending it, it's okay. So that's a whole other argument, going back to, hey, this is how we wrote something 200 years ago, we should never change it. That's a whole different discussion we can have. But the point on just trickle-down economics being that the thought is, give all the money to the people at the top, and they're going to give it down to the people at the bottom. That just doesn't work, and that's what most of the data shows. That was my point.
Yeah, totally. I think there's definitely the mentality that trickle-down economics means that wealthier people are going to continue to invest, continue to grow, continue to hire more people. But quite honestly, that's not what happens. I mean, relatively anecdotally, literally just a couple of weeks ago, my friend, are ready for a horror story that really backs up Tim's point in the mentality of trickle-down economics. I have a really good friend who is Ivy League educated, makes a ton of money doing analytics in New York for an ad agency. They've actually boomed under COVID because they happen to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and so they're making advertisements for things that people like. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to get vaccinated for everything as a phenomenon of COVID, right? So their business is booming, right? And then the other clients are tech sector, which I don't need to explain why that's booming. Recently, even though the company has had incredible growth, all-time high growth, instead of, now keep in mind, he's at relatively high up. So the one step below him, most people at that level, being a senior analyst and junior analysts and entry-level analysts all require prestigious degrees or experience. The company decided to fire and lay off every single person below the manager level. So all senior analysts, all junior analysts, all entry-level analysts. This is a $1 billion company with thousands of employees. Instead of reinvesting and hiring more people, they fired everybody and now outsourced all those jobs to India.
So is your argument against globalization, or what's your argument for?
I think his argument is that Trump's tax cuts didn't give them more jobs.
Right. The argument is that the wealthier a person is, the wealthier an industry is, does not mean that they're going to invest those dollars back into more employees. It does not mean they're going to invest those dollars into
they invested it into employees. Those employees just live somewhere else
with way less pay.
Yeah, so that's right, because that's worth it to them. That's capitalism. They work for that wage because in their country that is worth it for them. They get a return, and so in return, whatever service they provide is now cheaper for their customer, and more capital is freed up to reinvest into the economy.
Yeah, but those jobs should have stayed here.
I'm sure they didn't just straight up call all their customers and say, "Hey, we're lowering our price by 10% because we just outsource."
How do you know?
No, because I've worked for companies that outsource stuff. You keep the price the same, you make more profit.
So let me just say this then, and you guys can say whatever you want. But I think we should get to Chris's spicy hot topic for tonight. But our fundamental disagreement is that you guys come at companies with like a pessimistic Scrooge McDuck attitude, where you're thinking about all the things that could and do go wrong, or the things that you disagree with how they do things. And it's like, if companies make actual mistakes, right? So what you just told me wasn't a mistake. They actually made their company more efficient. It sucks for the people that work there here in this country. And there's some arguments to be made for protective, like globalism versus, nationalism. I didn't take either of you for nationalists, which is kind of weird because you're making nationalist arguments. But these companies go under if they make shitty decisions that you're talking about, right? For example, if they get a tax break and they hoard that money and they don't reinvest it, or they don't hire more people, or they don't expand or renovate the building or get better gear, like if they don't do that, their company will fail to the competitors who do those things, right? So it's kind of like a mindset thing. I don't know, Chris, that sucks for those people. But that company's going to do better now, right? It's more efficient now. And you can talk about a protective thing, again, but I don't think either of you are nationalists. So keeping jobs in the United States, I don't think is on your agenda.
It is on my agenda. Yeah, no, I'm pretty much here for that.
That is kind of a Bernie thing. So
I think a flaw in your logic there, and this applies to what I study a lot too, which is the markets, is that the economy isn't efficient. And what I mean by that is, so if you study markets and investing and stuff, there's two thoughts in the world.
Let's do this. Make your point quick, and then let's go.
I'll do it. One is that the market's efficient, one's it's not. And basically, what that means is that all the information's already out there, and it's going to work the way it's supposed to, right? Like you can't beat the market because everybody already knows everything, and the price is what it's supposed to be. And so you're assuming that capitalism is efficient, and that, if this company doesn't do things perfectly, somebody else is going to do them perfectly, and they're going to overtake that person. But that historically is not what's happened in capitalism. What happens in capitalism is a company gets ahead, and they have the weight and the power to throw around, and they're able to take out their competition and build a monopoly, and then rule a certain sector of the thing. And so there's now been put in place a lot of laws and other things to prevent monopolies and other things like that, right? But the basis of it still applies, that the companies aren't looking to distribute that money to their employees or to their customers or to anybody else. If they can get by and do something and make more money for their pocket, for the shareholders or for the owner of the company, if it's small enough that it's not public or anything like that, that's what they're going to do. That's their goal. It's not saying that they're... And I'm not saying that it's wrong. Hold on. I'm not saying that it's wrong. It does happen that way. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, right? That's why you start a business, is to make money. I'm not saying it's wrong to try and make money. I'm not saying it's wrong to be rich or to be rewarded for the risk that you took and the capital you put in and the time you put in or the luck that you had or anything like that. None of that. All I'm saying is, from an economics perspective, if you're trying to look at total GDP growth for country, what's best for the population, trickle-down economics is not it. It's redistribution to some extent of those earnings back to the population to pump them up and to grow GDP. Before we kick off of this, I wanted to put up data that you hit on, which was this is old. It's 2014, but it is what it is. Income paid by what groups? So you can see that the wealthy do pay a significant chunk of the taxes, but then you get into here where you have the fairly wealthy. They don't pay shit somehow. I'm curious to look into this deeper and see what happens here.
Yeah, look into that. I want to know what. That's weird.
So something I noticed when I was looking at this, our earlier discussion, which we might get to, which was the distribution of people who voted Republican versus Democrat.
Yeah.
This group here is what voted Republican. Remember, it was like as you got more money.
Wait, but that's just.
Or the other way around. I forget. Anyway,
share
it was
of
that price range. Yeah.
Share of net income tax burden. I'm not sure what the two blue lines are actually, or the two lines are.
Adjusted gross income.
Yeah. Okay,
So the share of the total income of the country, right? So the share of these people make 28% of the total income of the country. So for their income, they pay a higher percentage of
Okay.
taxes.
All right. So that just looks weird because of the way that this graph is set up. Because the intervals.
But if you only look at the red, which is net income tax burden, so of all the taxes paid, they paid 55% of it. This group, the middle class, paid 40% of it. Right, and so the poor obviously are receiving benefits from taxes; they get credits and other things, right? And so
where do you think they paid 40? I see they paid 16.
20,
oh, you're adding those together.
30,
gotcha.
40.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wait, so you're considering 100,000 to 200,000 as middle class?
I mean, not really. I don't think. I just said it as meaning on this graph.
The middle of the graph.
It's yeah. I mean, it's not middle class. I'd say it's probably 200 plus is maybe the top 20% income range of the country or something.
That's like the rich people. I would consider over 100,000, not rich, but those are well-off people. Well-off people are paying all the taxes. Look at that. That's like 16 to like if you factor in the
if you do over 100,000, if you do over 100,000, you're looking at 79, 80, 85%. People that make over $100,000 pay 85% of the tax burden.
That's progressive enough for me. I mean, it's like middle class is paying 16%. Middle class and below is combined seems to be paying about 15 or 16% of taxes.
Yeah. So I think to compare the two, it's interesting though that until you get to this point, right here is where it kind of breaks. Everybody here is paying a smaller percentage in taxes than they are than their percentage of AGI is equal to. Here, 100 to 200,000, you break even, right? You're paying what you earn, and then as you go higher, you pay more than you earn, and it increases obviously. And this is an interesting group because this 250,000 or more, like the guy that makes $1 billion a year or whatever, skews this graph intensely, right? But the point being, right? So. I agree with you that the wealthy or wealthier, the better off, pay the majority of the taxes. And I don't think that our system needs to be much more progressive than this.
I think it's progressive. We just need to work with the money we have.
But I think that, I think on the corporate level, we should pay more attention to making sure that the businesses pay taxes. But that's a whole other topic. Anyway, I'll let you get to yours, Chris. I appreciate all the time and patience. Totally. And I just heard a scream from one of my kids, so I'm back. I know that's not professional. I apologize, but I'll be right back.
Do your thing, man.
Totally. Well, all right. So I guess my hot take, I guess this is a good note to end on too, because I don't think it's going to take too long. So I'm all here for the taking down of statutes that were developed that commemorate Confederate soldiers and Christopher Columbus. All here for taking them all down. For a couple reasons. First and foremost, I mean, I almost want to hear your arguments first, but I'm just going to throw my cards.
I can do that if you want.
Sure. Why do you think Confederate statutes and or Christopher Columbus statutes should remain erected?
Okay. Okay. So Christopher Columbus is the hardest one, so I'll start there. I'm of two minds on that. I understand where both sides are coming from. Like Christopher Columbus was not just a sort of a revisionist history way. This is not just something that the liberals just made up in the past couple of years to smear him, or like made up a whole bunch of stuff about pilgrims knowing about plague blankets and stuff like that. That's not this. Like Christopher Columbus was an actual monster, right? From what I understand, he was a barbarous enslaver of the natives, and I think even people back in Europe are kind of looking at him like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, what's going on over there?" That kind of stuff. So, that being said, honestly, that alone is kind of enough to say probably shouldn't have any statues of him. I'm okay with, though. I've heard a couple interesting or intriguing reasons to keep Christopher Columbus statues up. I'll do this quickly because this is your topic. One, I heard that there's like an Italian American sections. He is representative of their Italian identity. So that's one thing, and I can't really speak to them. I'm half Italian, but I'm not ethnically Italian. I just grew up as a plain white American in the sort of woods, suburbs, whatever. So those are the arguments. Also, celebrating the idea of the sort of the first contact that led to the creation of the greatest country in the world. I can understand celebrating that as well, right? But again, on top of that, he was a monster. So that's Christopher Columbus. So for me, if you want me to sum it up, I'm 50-50 or more leaning towards getting rid of Christopher Columbus statues or putting them in a museum as is the talking point. Confederate statues, I learned a little bit through the debate. It was actually good, that statues debate back then. I learned that most of the statues were put up during the Civil Rights Movement as a sort of like a fuck you to black people. So those particular statues, I'm less protective of, but I also understand that. So every dictator in the past that we talk about, Alexander the Great, all of the Caesars, all of the great warriors, Greeks, all of the Mesopotamian kings, all of them were actually just power-hungry, bloodthirsty monsters, right? And yet we can still celebrate the fact that they were, of their times, military geniuses, or in some cases, administrative geniuses, what have you. So it's okay. I think we have a bit of a double standard, and I'm obviously curious what you have to say about this, but we have a bit of a double standard when it comes to hating somebody like Robert E. Lee, who was arguably, and it is arguably, because a lot of people debate this, one of the most brilliant American generals ever, even though he was fighting for the South. He led one of the most successful campaigns with a massively underfunded, undermanned army against a well-funded, well-organized, existing, standing Northern army, and he beat them back for I think it was a couple of years or a year. So I forget. I'm not too good with my Civil War history. Anyways, my point is that we can celebrate historical figures for their achievements, right? Being one of the greatest underdogs ever, say, or a good general, or a good leader. We can do that for other people, for ancient leaders, for distant figures, but we can't seem to apply that to our own Southern symbols. Yeah. So that would be my argument for keeping them up. And
Sure, let me share the point then. So I guess, yeah, so we're relatively close on the Christopher Columbus thing. I think, you already said it pretty much out loud. I mean, Columbus was a total monster. I mean, the dude literally committed genocide on the Aztecs. They would have, absolute just horrendous acts of just horror against the Native Americans, indigenous people. And so, I mean, to me, every country, it's actually very interesting. Every country, and this plays true for our Confederates as well.
To be fair, just a correction real quick. Are you talking about Cortez or Columbus? Because I think Cortez was the one who brought down the Aztec Empire. Columbus was a bloodthirsty slaveholder, but I don't think he did genocide. I don't know.
No, there's some Columbus also murdered a ton of people in South America before. Yeah, so I might be confusing the two. But anyways, besides the point, every country for the most part entertains revisionist history. This is true of every nation in the world. But there's certain things that I don't see revisionist history on. Germany in World War II, apartheid in South Africa. We don't see revisionist history when we're looking at the flaws of Peru when they were having their crazy chaos in the 70s and 80s. Right? So honest reflection in history is really important for the health of a nation. Not everything. The reality is there's going to be certain things that we never dive deep into textbooks because, to be honest, it's easier for the country. But certain things like Columbus, I think we can nuke him. Put him in the museums. Totally eradicate the statutes. I actually think, for the point of Italian pride, it's like, I agree with that. Connecticut actually has the largest settlement of Italian immigrants in the country. why on earth do we want our Italian celebrations to exist around a genocidal maniac? Why not, celebrate the Italian family? Why not celebrate? Why don't we replace these statutes with something better? Something
right. To clarify, I'm saying it was their choice. The Italians themselves in those communities want to keep those statues up.
And I'm seeing that a little bit right now because I know it's happening in New Britain. And, there's some serious talk, though, about, what about, putting up another famous Italian person? Because I think the sentiment of wanting Columbus up there, when I talk to people or when I read comments, slightly anecdotal, but it's based on revisionist history. It's like this man discovered our country. This man sailed the ocean blue. We sing about him in preschool. It's like we're holding on to false nostalgia. We're talking about we are products of revisionist history and what we've learned. In terms of the Confederacy, I think there's something to be said about replacing these statutes and putting them in the museum. I think there's something about maybe Robert E. Lee was a great general. So was Hitler. Hitler was a great general.
Not necessarily.
He had some great generals behind him. He had some really the Blitzkriegs, all of that. We talk about him in the histories. Hitler was also one of the most evil people in all of history. We're not going to put statues of him up in Germany. And I think that's something really important. We can acknowledge certain attributes if we really care to. But we shouldn't celebrate the identity or existence of these people, especially, the reality is look, I am slightly nationalist in the sense that I love this country. I'm all here for international trade. I'm here for that. But at the end of the day, it's we should look after the United States without hurting others, but we should look after our country. And the fact that these individuals tried to split our country in half, especially in the foundations of slavery, these are huge problems to me. And so that's, maybe sure people have these Confederate. It's just I can't help but compare. When we look at the Civil War, we look at the Confederacy. We don't put up statutes celebrating the presidents of apartheid. We don't, and that was very recent in South Africa. We don't put up statutes celebrating Nazis. We don't have people in Germany saying, yes, my grandfather was a Nazi, and we're very proud of his work at the concentration camps. Nazi pride in our family. No, we don't do that. We don't
clip it.
Right?
Matthew, clip it. Quick, Nazi pride. I heard it.
Don't you dare, right? No, but that's the issue, right? Is there's this false sense of revisionist history. If you go look at Southern textbooks, it's a gross miscontext of what the Confederacy actually was, and I can almost understand why people believe it's this great thing when it wasn't. And so the fact is, the country was tried to split in half. Most of these statutes, as you said at first and foremost, most of these statutes were enacted and built during Jim Crow era as a way of a giant middle finger. Some of them were enacted beforehand. So maybe the answer here: do an exploratory commission for those that were created during the Civil War, or not during the Civil War, during Jim Crow. I think we should just melt them down and, I don't know, make pots and pans out of them. But
give them to black people.
Sure. Whatever. Most of the statutes are made with pretty bad quality as well because they were rushed to put them up.
Right. But, yeah. Most of them were made from the same cast, apparently.
Yeah, it's so crazy. For the ones that were made beforehand, that were truly made because, I don't know, some town in Alabama wanted Robert E. Lee thrown up, or the Carolinas, and this is 1880. All right, you know what? Take it down and let's put it in a museum where it can belong. That's we don't need history in front of us on the highway to remember it, to celebrate it. In this case, not celebrate, but memorialize certain dynamics of it, discuss the Civil War in a non-revisionist sense. There's a ways to empathize with, I'll never forget, I know I'm going on a tangent, but I'll never forget a history teacher. I can't remember which one, but he said a really good point. He's like, the reality is when you look at the southern states, a lot of the soldiers didn't go into the war because they were like, yes, let's protect slavery and whatnot. Most people weren't slave owners. Although granted, what they were doing was protecting slavery, but their main intent, you had all these small town farmers that straight up wanted to go on this, the war was built up to be this adventure back then. It's like yeah, in a sense it kind of is today. It's you're gonna go see the world, you're gonna see the country, you're gonna go explore the north. These are people that never left, and so you had a lot of people that thought that what they were doing was generally the right thing. And so to that, we shouldn't just like piss on the South, but there's a ways to have non-revisionist context here. And I think that's what's important. So I'm all here for nuke the Columbus statutes, put other prominent Italian Americans up in place of them, take down Civil War statutes that were Confederates, and put them in museums if they were enacted before Jim Crow, if they were enacted during Jim Crow, melt them down, make necklaces out of them. I don't know, like do something cool. Give them all to Oprah and let her like just like sell them off to do some cool charity.
I mean, in my opinion, I wasn't here when the original question or whatever is posed, but I think I get the gist. By taking some of these statues down, it is furthering revisionist history, right? It's like, hey, this didn't actually happen. These aren't the people that did this stuff. Like, let's not talk about that, right?
That's an interesting take.
Hey, let's blast George Washington's face off of Mount Rushmore because he owned slaves. Can't have that. Like,
I agree.
Right,
well, it is in your opinion now, but maybe it won't be in 20 years. Who knows, right? But so the point I'm making though is like, there you have to find a way to make a distinction on what are we celebrating these things for, right? We're not celebrating George Washington because he had slaves. That was common for the time. He was no different than many other people that would have been in his position. So having his face on coins and having his face on Mount Rushmore and things like that, that's okay, right? Like we're not celebrating him for that. We understand now that isn't acceptable, but that wasn't the understanding back then. And so I think we need to be able to separate, to your point in some aspect, we need to separate what these statues are trying to embody versus what somebody's getting all butthurt about.
I get
and I think that's important. And I mean, to your point on something you said also, you said, the Southern textbooks teach the Confederacy to be something it wasn't. I'm guessing you learned, since you live in, I think, Connecticut, you learned from a Northern textbook. So maybe it's teaching you incorrectly. And maybe the actual middle ground is somewhere that is the truth, right? Like, we need to be conscious of what we're seeing. And the winner rewrites history. That's how things go. And so we need to be conscious of that. I don't want anyone to get their feelings hurt, right? I want people to be happy. I want people to live their lives. I want people to be able to walk by whatever the statue is and be like, oh, that's just, that's a statue and it doesn't offend me. But at the end of the day, if there's some value to having a statue up, and somebody gets offended by it, like, that's on them to be offended. It's not on everybody else. And so to your point, though, a little bit what you said, Chris, I think, and you also hinted on this, Nathan, why was the statue put up? If it was during the Jim Crow era, where it was a way for white supremacists or whatever to put up that middle finger and say, screw you, we're not going along with this, I think that's important, and I think those need to be taken into account. But if it's like Christopher Columbus and we're celebrating the fact that this person came out and did things for our country, the fact that we have done revisionist history and changed to the truth of what happened is separate from having to take these statues down. Like, that statue was erected as a way to say, hey, we have pride in our country and what happened, not, hey, we're proud that this guy was a genocidal maniac. And that's not what's been taught. So I think I take a neutral stance on this. I think, like, in specific instances, some things can be taken down, but overall, like, it's just a damn statue. Like, it's not something we should get worked up about.
I'm going to counter that and say, to be honest, it absolutely is something we should actually get worked up about. And I'll say a couple things just to do some fair counters, because I really understand where you're coming from, truly. And I held similar beliefs a while ago. Like, well, it's just a statue, but
so you used to be right.
It's a lot deeper than that. First and foremost, apartheid does not need statutes for South Africa to remember what occurred there. Liberia does not need statutes to remember what occurs there. So
why do we have Why do we have big monuments to the people that died in
exactly
in Korea or Vietnam?
100%. You're getting to my next point. This is exactly why memorials, statutes, public recognitions truly.
Can you say statue? Say statue for me.
Statue.
He says it right.
Yeah,
I could have swore that it sounded like statutes. like legal stat. And I was trying to. I was like, am I hearing this right?
Sometimes I say it like that. Statues, whatever you want to call them.
No, it's fine. I'm not to call you out live here. My bad.
Memorials, public recognitions do a lot for the soul of a country. They do a lot for our psyche, our subconscious. When you're seeing, when every day you're driving and you're on the Robert E. Lee Highway, you're not directly in the front conscious of your brain thinking like, yeah, go Confederates, go slavery. But the reality is these things do affect us on the subconscious level. I can even prove it. If you guys want to do a study at some point later this week, I can actually prove it, that I can prime the way that you will answer certain questions by showing you certain images beforehand that will alter the way that you respond to certain questions.
It's easier than that. If you all you have to do is make a point, and I'm going to counter it because I love to play.
No, not you. No, like all you have to do is either of you to make a point, and I'm going to be over here like, you're fucking wrong. I know they're wrong. Exactly, I don't know why they're wrong. Right?
It's an actual, it's a tried and true study that is just simply non-negotiable. But it's stuff like that these statutes and memorials really matter. Yeah, in times of post-conflict societies, which in this case, we're a few steps away from post-conflict civil war, but it is an internal post-conflict of our country. Memorializing things truly matters. So replacing Confederate statues with something that memorializes the Civil War in a way that is more honest. The reality is when I say revisionist history, objectively speaking, this isn't just I read a Northern textbook. I actually spent a lot of time studying this throughout my college career, and I made sure to read things in an unbiased way.
Northern college career.
Sure. But Harvard's one of the most conservative Ivy Leagues, and so when you look at these things, the reality is the Civil War.
It's like saying that's like saying Elon Musk is one of the poorest rich people. Come on.
It's not though. These are. I know you're joking, but other people truly, use these as genuine arguments to discredit things when they hear what they disagree with. People will say, "Oh, you went to a Northern Ivy League." It's like, well, they're all in the North, but they're But if I agree with, here's the thing: if I agree with a conservative, they get such a hard on. They're like, yes, this Ivy League person agrees with conservative. Yeah. They love to use our credentials when.
If you're a gay Ivy Leaguer, keep note on that. Is that a bad joke? It's a bad joke.
Fine. Bad joke. What I'm saying is that memorializing things truly.
Too many whiskeys.
It truly matters for the soul of a country, and so, and just as memorializing hateful things also is bad for the soul of a country. So yeah, we do need to treat statues as something more serious, because at the end of the day, we're only human, right? Things like symbols matter. Symbols really matter. That's why every company in the world is a symbol.
Well, I agree with you on that, actually, 100%, that symbols matter, and that memorializing the wrong thing it can be wrong. But where I disagree is that because somebody did something means that item is memorializing the bad. And again, I go back to the George Washington on Mount Rushmore, right? We aren't memorializing that he owned slaves. He inherited slaves, then he went out and bought more on his own, right? It wasn't like he wasn't in on this thing and didn't do it. But we're not memorializing that part of who he was. We're memorializing other things that he did. And so I think it's important to try and separate that, right? Like when Christopher Columbus, as an example, when Christopher Columbus came to the U.S. and found this country, it wasn't like he was alone in his belief that the people that were currently indigenous to this country were savages and didn't deserve the same rights that they had, and that they had a right to take the land. I'm not saying that that's right. I 100% believe it's not. But at the time, that was kind of the normal thought. It wasn't like he was the only one saying, hey, let's go kill these people, right? And so by having a statue of Christopher Columbus, we're not memorializing the fact that he was out there murdering Indians, which is terrible. Just like we're not memorializing the fact that George Washington had slaves. We're memorializing other things that he did. And I know your point is, well, we're memorializing kind of a revisionist history that wasn't true. And that's an argument I can agree with, that we shouldn't have non-truths out there. I think it's more important to have truths. But to the point of that those statues have to get melted down and burned or hidden away, to me, that's that doesn't make sense. Like, to ignore what the past was and what happened doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
All right, final thoughts, Chris, and then I'll do my final thoughts, and then we got to let people go.
Totally. One last point on this. I mean, I think I agree with you on George Washington, but George is a little bit more complex of a case than someone like Christopher Columbus, and especially if at least, we don't agree on Columbus, at least infinitely more so than the Confederate soldier statutes, because George Washington, explicitly, we're memorializing, we're commemorating the founding of a country, the founding of the underdog fighting the British. With the Confederate statute, at the end of the day, that statute, no matter how brilliant that person was, no matter how good of a soldier, no matter how good they represented their town, no matter how many links of ancestry, the whole point of their identity, Robert E. Lee, these soldiers, their whole point was seceding from the Union. They wanted to split our country in half. They wanted to break up the United States, like explicitly take apart our democracy.
But isn't getting rid of their statue revisionist history? I mean, had they won, all of the northern generals would be hated and they would be despised, and they'd be like, they wanted to change the way things were, and things needed to stay the same, and like it's about and celebrating the fact that these guys. You made the point earlier that these guys didn't go out and purely and say, "Hey, we need to fight to preserve slavery." They did it for many other reasons. And to say, hey, we can't honor these guys' sacrifice or efforts or anything else that we respect about them because they were fighting for this one thing, even though that wasn't their main goal, to me doesn't make any sense.
It's revisionist history if we stop talking about it correctly. What's revisionist history is different from taking, if we were to change the nature of the way we taught it in textbooks, if we were to pretend it never happened, then that's erasing history. That's changing history. Taking down statutes is stopping the commemoration of an evil act of not these individuals, but the movement itself was wrong. And sure, if the South won, Northern statutes wouldn't exist. But if the South also won, the institution of slavery would still exist. So I'm pretty.
No, it wouldn't. The world culture's changed. It wouldn't exist still.
I mean, and Brazil didn't eradicate their slavery until early 1900s. We would have had a good another 50, 60 years at least of slavery. And
sure, but it'd be gone now.
Oh, for sure.
It would have been bloody. You would have had resurgent camps. If we were born, we probably would have been fighting them. You would have had our country's economy would have tanked. We wouldn't have been who we were in World War II. We wouldn't have been who we were in the Cold. There would have been
a lot of things would have changed globally. 100%.
We would have never been where we are today if the South had won, without a doubt, because the North would have never stopped fighting. You would have had resurgence. You would have had. So what I'm saying is
that's speculation.
But hold on. But to that point, you're making it sound like I know, but you're making it sound like the North should have kept fighting because they were right.
They were.
But if the South keeps fighting for what they believed in, even though they lost, they're wrong.
They were.
To me, that's a biased view. Like if you can't say that it's okay to keep fighting from one side and not the other.
They were explicit. That Hitler was wrong because he had concentration camps. Slavery was wrong. I do believe the Civil War is pretty much a black and white issue. Sure, you can talk about states' rights and pride. It's a pretty black and white issue.
Let me make my closing comments then, because it addresses that. So one of the very large concerns that the modern right has with the left, and especially when we talk about issues like this, is that you and your group generally, not you specifically, but the left generally tends to examine these issues with a unidimensional lens, right? And you have buckets that black and white buckets that you throw people into. Hitler goes in the black bucket. George Washington's still in the white bucket, even though Thomas Jefferson statues are starting to get torn down. Some George Washington statues were getting torn down. I know you're not for that. I understand, but the problem is that you're like single issue voters in history. It's like, okay, well, which side of the Civil War were you on? Oh, you were on the South. You're bad. I'm just going to use Robert E. Lee because he's the one I know the best. He was actually an amazing character, right? You read anything that the dude wrote, and it was just like all of it was profound, right? And it's like he was again he was an amazing leader, right? It wasn't just that he was a brilliant tactical mind and he just like shuttered himself in the tent. Like everywhere he went, he was like worshipped by his men because of the way that he was. He was a charismatic, well thought out, well reasoned, very smart general. Like he was great for all of those kinds of things.
Did
and
you go
on
to school
top
in the
of
South?
that, what?
Did you go to school in the South?
No, sir. No,
Oh, okay.
I researched this a lot. Actually, I'm fascinated by the Civil War. So on top of that, a couple more things. Like this is what I'm trying to do right here is demonstrate that this is a colorful character. This is not just somebody that you put in the black bin of history, right? He, when the war broke out, he said when he was, I think it was shortly after he switched his allegiance from the North to the South for his home state of Virginia. A quote of his is that I wish now that every slave in the South was freed in order to avoid war, right? Which is an interesting statement. There's a color in that statement. That's something to consider, right? This was a colorful, very, very talented soldier, right? And he's enigmatic, and this is a person that's worth celebrating. And at the end of the day, his actions weren't for him. I'm sorry, his actions weren't for slavery. At least not in large part. His actions were mostly his duty to the state, right? Because and he writes about that. His actions were largely fueled by he was loyal to the state, because before the Civil War, most people were more loyal to their state than the country. And like I don't know. So I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like this is a colorful person. He's worth celebrating for a whole host of different reasons. And there's no like. There's not much wrong with people in the South venerating this person, because he was he was just larger than life, you know? And at the end of the day, for soldiers and generals in the Southern Army, especially soldiers, right? So especially down in the rank and file, even as you start going up through the ranks, and even when you get to General Robert E. Lee, the War of Northern Aggression, as they call it, it factors very little into what they do in the day and day. Those people were there. They were thinking about the man next to them. They were thinking about the men under their control. The war was about their brother. It was about the person next to them. And they all showed incredible bravery that young people should aspire to, regardless of what the larger cause of the war was. And so, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if a community wants to celebrate it, they should have a vote. They should work that out with themselves. I don't think we should be dictating that people take down those statues.
I really hear what you're saying, and I hope this next comment isn't taken into consideration of putting things in the black and white, right? But we can say the exact same justification you just gave to like Nazi soldiers in Germany. They were young people fighting for their brotherhood. The larger speculations of the war were not impacting them. They weren't the ones putting Jews in concentration camps. They were simply fighting because Germany was wronged in World War I, and they wanted to have German pride and rebuild their economy, and so they fought alongside their charismatic leader of Hitler. It's the same justification, and I'm not trying to belittle it, really. I'm not trying to, but at some point, yeah, people lose wars, and sometimes people are on the wrong side of history, even though they didn't ask to be, right? So those ground soldiers in Germany didn't ask justice, and this is also why certain trials, certain psychological examinations, there is something to be said about following orders, right? There is something to be said. There's the famous. I'll let this be my closing remark. There's that famous Stanford experiment, not the prison one, but the shock experiment, where you have a person telling you to keep shocking, heighten the voltage, and so on. And even though they know that the voltage that they're about to give can probably seriously injure somebody, they still say yes, they still comply, even though there's absolutely no reason that they're still in that room. They could have just walked out, and they're literally just in a paid experiment. They're not losing anything. I think it's a free experiment. They weren't even getting paid anything. They were just there doing a psych experiment that they thought was about education. Instead, it was like, how far will someone go? 80% of people hit the final dose that they even asked, will this kill them? Maybe. So there's something to be said for that. However, we can talk about that in the history books, exactly what you just said. History professors, history teachers should talk about that. They should mention Robert E. Lee was fighting for his state. These individuals were fighting for their state. They were fighting for a greater cause that happened to have been malintended, right? But that doesn't mean we keep statutes up that may celebrate that, right? It's something I can't get around behind. And now I get it. I don't want to take down Thomas Jefferson or Franklin or these are our founding fathers. There's something to be said about the foundation of our country and being conscious that we're not looking through. And we can. That's a whole other point. It's a whole other point. And there's things I disagree with. They never talk about slavery in the Constitution. They knew it was going to be a big problem. I mean, they do, but not explicitly.
Yep.
They just kind of kicked the ball down the road.
Yep.
But with all of that said, Civil War is relatively black and white. When you really boil it down, I really spent some time doing this. It really comes down to states' rights as it pertains to the rights of southern states to hold slaves and the northern states not being cool with it. Granted, the northern states are all still for segregation and discrimination, so it's not like the North
benefiting off the slave labor.
Right? It's not that the North were these beautiful, holy people either, but for the institution of slavery itself, they wanted to eradicate it. So I'm just saying, we can take these statutes down. I'd be pretty okay with that. Throw them in a museum and make history across the country really talk about this. So one, it's not black and white, right? There are black and white components of it, but there is a deeper component, like what you just shared. I didn't know that about Robert E. Lee. I didn't know that he was like, I wish we could just not have slavery. At the end of the day, he was a soldier fighting for his state because he had pride in his state. We should learn about that. Right? We should learn about that while also being able to say, hey, the South was still fighting for this. So there's my closing point.
I think that's his point, though, is that statue may have been erected for such a thing. Is like, hey, this guy was a really good guy, like had a ton of great qualities. He did a lot for this area, a lot for this county, country, city, wherever the statue is, right? And that's why the statue's there. But those in the North are like, he fucking pro-slavery, tear it down, right? Like, that's the point, though, is like, from your point of view, these statues need to go because they stand for something wrong. But for the people that erected them, they may not stand for that. And even for those that it did, like, to your point, like, should we have statues of some of the Nazi people? Maybe. I'm sure there was great people that worked in the Nazi regime that had no interest in what Hitler was trying to do, but somehow got tied up in it. And similar to Robert E. Lee, right? Like he doesn't sound like he was very much pro-slavery. He was like, hey, I'd give up slavery to end this war, right? That's not very pro-slavery.
Symbols matter, and we shouldn't, even though I'm sure there's people that, they were still complicit in the acts of everything by being part of the cause. And I'm not here to attack people for that, right? I'm not saying the people that did the Stanford experiment were bad people by clicking the final trigger, but they could have walked out of that room, right? There's nothing keeping them in that room. And there's a great quote, there's no, something really, really, really tragic. I guess it's not to end on such a sombering note, but there's a book I read by, I think it's Elie Wiesel, who's one of the survivors of Auschwitz. And he makes a really, really dark comment. And he's like, there's no heroes left in concentration camps because they've all been murdered. Every single person that tried to stand up got shot. And I'm not saying that, we should attack people for not being the people that stood up to stand against the soldiers. But I think we should. I think if right now, I think the three of us would been those people getting shot because we would have said, no, this is wrong. And, for what it's worth, people didn't need to enlist. People could have ran away. People could have done other things. And at the end of the day, even with all that aside, because I realize that's a radical point. That's a little bit radical. Symbols matter, and we shouldn't have statutes up for apartheid, for Holocaust, unless it's memorializing the tragedies that occurred. Same with Civil War.
Yeah, I feel like we could have done that for a full hour or two.
We got good.
We went as late as we've gone so far tonight. So I think anybody, I don't know if anybody's still with us. Oh my goodness, there's two souls still watching us right now. It's crazy. So thank you everybody for hanging out with us for this long. I think I'm feeling real good about this podcast. I think we have 3 very good clippable segments. So be looking for us to, I'm probably going to finally end up clipping these and putting these out as separate segments, but the whole segment's still going to be available. But for tonight, so thank you everybody for hanging out. We had a great time. Like, comment, and subscribe, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Peace out. Happy Thanksgiving.
Gobble, gobble.